Watch this.
Can you feel the anticipation? We're a month out from Election Day, but money has been coming into candidates' campaign accounts for several months. We're going to peek at some of the numbers. Doing God's work by housing people. A nonprofit is working to turn open church property into affordable homes for families in need. Is it possible to keep an asteroid from crashing into Earth? Well, we now know that answer. A test so successful, we know that answer weeks before we thought we would. The countdown to the November general election clicks into a new gear today. Today marks 1 month out from an important election cycle, the part where all major statewide positions are up for a vote. And while this season doesn't seem to be as combative as, say, the primary season, it's still worth seeing who is leading when it comes to money coming into candidates. Here's Chief Political Reporter Joe Paris.
1 month out from Election Day here in Idaho, and millions of dollars are flowing into political campaigns. Across all Idaho races since September 1st of this year, 6,721 donors have given about $2.8 million to 222 candidates and 114 political action committees. Looking back a year to October 12, 2021, about 35,000 donors have given $26.6 million to 755 candidates and 206 political action committees. And about $18 million of that number was just for candidates. So what do major statewide races look like in terms of donors and dollars? First, on the race to be Idaho's governor, incumbent Governor Brad Little, since last year has seen about 3,000 donors give about $2.5 million. Since September 1st, Governor Little has had 356 donors give $161,527. Stephen Hite, the candidate from the Idaho Democrats in this race, has had 31 donors give about $24,000 since October of last year. Since September 1st, 10 donors have donated about $4,000 to Mr. Hite. The independent candidate in this race, Ammon Bundy, has seen success since last October, having 1,300 donors give about $500,000. Since September 1st of this year, 627 donors have reportedly given Bundy about $87,000. Governor Little far and away has more donors and dollars than his opponents combined. No surprise, though, for the incumbent. Maybe the most talked about race this election season, the battle to be Idaho's next Attorney General. Former Idaho Congressman, Republican candidate Raul Labrador, since last October has had 709 donors give $874,125. Since September 1st of this year, Labrador has had 159 donors give about $136,000. His opponent on the other side of the aisle, Democrat Tom Arkush, joined the race recently, but if you date back to his entire campaign, he's had 762 donors give about $283,000. Since September 1st, Arkush has seen 318 donors give about $87,000. So, Mr. Arkush is seeing more individual people donate to his campaign, but Labrador is seeing a significantly higher contribution mark. So, do more dollars or donors lead to an election victory? Well, time will tell in this cycle. In the race to be Idaho's next lieutenant governor, Republican Scott Bedke has seen 991 donors give about $846,000 since October of last year. Since September 1st, Bedke has seen 78 donors give about $88,000. On the other side of the race for the Idaho Democrats, Terry Pickens Manweiler has had 689 donors give about $264,000 since last October. Since September 1st, 174 donors have given Pickens Manweiler about $28,000. Party-wise, Idaho Democrats are seeing more activity in terms of individual donors as of late, but Republicans are receiving more money from donors. Since September 1st, we have this breakdown for you. Democrats have seen 1,844 donors give about $435,000 to 64 candidates. The Republicans in the same time frame, since September 1st, have had 1,566 donors give about $965,000 to 133 candidates statewide. And if you look back about a year on the same question, overall party contributions from last October shake out this way. The Republicans have had about 23,000 donors give about $21 million to 692 candidates statewide. Meanwhile, Idaho Democrats have had 11,000 donors give about $4.8 million to 137 candidates. And money is not just flowing into statewide races, it's also the legislative races, county positions. All of them are drawing major money. And Brian, really, this conversation we're having is so that we can circle back to this data after the general election, again, 1 month from today, and we can answer a question, or try to answer a question I see from our viewers heading into elections. Is it more important to have more money or more donors? It'll be interesting to see kind of what the trend looks like. And I know that we're seeing a lot of extra attention into the race for the Attorney General's office. And we've seen a lot of donations from both sides of the aisle kind of go towards the Democrats, and it's a whole thing that we'll talk about another time.
I know you just threw a lot of numbers at us, but the gist of this is what? We're seeing more money than we saw, say, 4 years ago. And the other question is, it isn't a high-profile, like, election for the top spot, governor, like it was 4 years ago with the high-profile Paulette Jordan going against Brad Little and what have you. The money's going different spots this time? Right,
and again, like kind of with the race for Attorney General, 4 years ago when we had Lawrence Wasden, who was the incumbent, he had won the primary, there wasn't as much interest in that race, for example. So this time around, when you have Labrador and Arcouche, and it's politically a very hot race, you're seeing way more money go into that race than you would ever see previously. It is interesting, though, if you look at what you'd say the top race on the ballot, Governor Brad Little taking on Stephen Hite, that is nowhere near the attention that we'd seen between Paulette Jordan and Governor Little 4 years ago in the November general. And if you look back at the May primary 4 years ago with Labrador, Alquist, and Little, the money in that race and the advertising in that race is likely something we won't see again for at least 4 more years.
All right. Thank you very much, Joe. We'll keep tabs on that. And again, the 4-week countdown continues today. And some people have already voted absentee, by the way. In Idaho, absentee ballots have to be requested. They don't just mail them out as a matter of convenience. And so with that in mind, we noticed a take on Twitter over the weekend claiming those requests for absentee ballots were coming overwhelmingly from Republican voters. More registered Republicans were asking for an absentee ballot than registered Democrats, we were told, at a 2-to-1 pace. That tweet went on to use that number to call out all the calls for election integrity and all those who claim, without any basis of fact, absentee voting is rife with voter fraud. Implying if more Republicans are voting absentee, where most of those voter fraud claims were coming from, well, they must still believe in the integrity of Idaho's elections, right? Okay, so putting that part aside, we wanted to know if that claim was true, that twice as many Republicans plan to vote absentee this November. So we asked the Secretary of State's office to see what they're seeing. And yes, they are seeing twice as many Republicans request an absentee ballot this election cycle than Democrats. A little more than 50,000 to a little more than 22,000. Unaffiliated voters are also requesting absentee ballots, by the way. As you can see, so are Libertarians and Constitutions. However, it's all about the context, says Chief Deputy Secretary of State Chad Houck, because you see those numbers there on the right, the bigger numbers and percentages, that's where the nuance lives. It's based on a percentage of registered voters, of which Republicans outnumber Democrats in Idaho by a 4-to-1 margin. So it's actually opposite.
So in that regard, you take it against the 130,000 registered voters on the Democratic side, you've got about a 17% uptake rate on absentee ballot requests, while on the Republican side, that number is only 8.7, roughly 50,000 out of the 577,000 registered voters on the Republican side.
So you can see it's not really kind of like 2-to-1 in that regard. It's just based on a percentage. You take that away, then yeah, it is 2-to-1. But that's for the whole state. What about the state's most populated county? Well, that trend seems to be the same in Ada County. More Republican voters have requested absentee ballots, nearly 19,000 to a little more than 10,000. But based on that percentage we just talked about of how they registered to vote, it still leans Democratic, but just barely in Ada County, 18% to 13%, not the 2-to-1 that we see statewide. However, a lot more people are choosing to vote absentee this November than, say, back in 2018. Ada County Elections Office tells us they've seen a bump in nearly 10,000 requests over 4 years ago. You could attribute that to a couple of things, more people moving in or whatever. But with the biggest increase coming from Republican voters, that's about a 10% jump. And they say some of that could be because a lot of candidates are choosing this turn to include a request form for an absentee ballot with their mailers. So yes, more Republicans are asking to vote absentee this election cycle, but likely because there are 4 times as many Republicans registered to vote in this state. Regardless, according to the Secretary of State's office, it's still about 10% of the registered population in Idaho that still has faith in the absentee system. That's a number that hasn't changed much over the years, but it still can. The last day to request an absentee ballot is October 28th. In a continuously growing Treasure Valley, there's a constant debate on how we use the land around us. Zoning laws try to map this out, but we still argue over what should be commercial land and what should be residential. What about the land in between, the wasted land? I'm talking about land that's not used for anything. It's just sitting there. Well, affordable housing nonprofit LEAP says these plots of land could help chip away at the affordable housing shortage in the Treasure Valley. However, that land isn't free. Nobody's just giving it away. And LEAP says a lot of empty and underutilized land belongs to local churches. And under LEAP's new Yes in God's Backyard initiative, churches are actually giving it away. Here's Andrew Bartline.
Keep your ears open around this Nampa neighborhood, and you might just hear a call you can answer. Reverend Nathan Roscom did.
Ever since I was in high school, I felt called to be in pastoral ministry.
The call. It led Reverend Roscom to the Lakeview Church of the Nazarene.
Yeah, I think for us, our mission is to be disciples, make disciples, and love our neighbor.
But not every church follower can even be a neighbor.
And we're in the north side of Nampa, and there's kind of greater need. A lot of individuals that struggle just aren't making enough.
Enough just to make ends meet.
I mean, we have people in our congregation who live in RVs in different places, in RV parks.
The lack of affordable housing is hard to ignore. According to housing nonprofit LEAP, the Treasure Valley alone is behind more than 8,000 affordable housing units.
Rents that are just astronomical. We see housing prices soaring.
But it wasn't even about what Reverend Roscom saw. It was about what he heard, the call.
We just straight out donated the land to them, no strings attached.
The church donated this plot of land to LEAP. The housing nonprofit will build an affordable home and sell it to a low-income family. LEAP will retain ownership of the land to ensure the property remains affordable to low-income families for the foreseeable future.
Dude, churches have a ton of property in the Treasure Valley, and a lot of it isn't being used for anything. And this is something that a lot of churches in our area can do.
And churches are doing it, including the Collister United Methodist Church. They leased the back of their parking lot to LEAP for 50 years at $1 a year. LEAP built 2 affordable rental units on the land. The projects are all part of a conceited effort LEAP calls Yes in God's Backyard.
You know, it's not a lot, but it's a house. And this is a way we can respond, you know, as Christ followers to an actual need that's in our area.
Sure, Reverend Roscom could have sold the land.
Well, we could do something unique with this.
But making a buck was never part of the call.
There's lives involved too. Like, how can we be mindful?
Reverend Roscom hopes he's not the only one listening.
I think I feel good that we can do that, right? That we can inspire other churches, and that it can serve as an example to like our own parishioners.
LEAP says this home will be priced for a family that makes 80% of the area median income. The city of Nampa defines that as low to moderate income, while that Collister project is priced to rent for families making 30% of the area median income. That's defined as extremely low income by the city of Boise. So there are several different projects in the works, Brian, of different churches doing this. I know LEAP is trying to get more churches to sign on to it. I mean, it's not going to solve the problem. There's not 8,000 churches that are going to say, here's land, but it's something.
There's 2 from Collister, 1 from Lakeview. I mean, it is something. It's a little bit at a time. Like you said, there's a lot of layers to this. You can't just put a 15-story apartment complex in the middle of wherever just because you want to.
It's not zoned for that in the middle of a Nampa neighborhood.
Right.
Certainly not.
It's all right. Well, like you said, they're doing something, and as you heard them say, hopefully somebody else will step up and do the same thing.
Yep, they're having success with it early with 2 churches.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. For the first time ever, we have intentionally changed the movement of a celestial body. Well, what does that mean for the future of Earth? Well, it's up to a former Eagle Mustang to figure out, and he's using the same math skills he learned in high school. All right, you know, anytime's a good time to connect with a 208. You can always find us on social media, but if you want to be part of today's show, well, then you best text us a clever message to this number, 208-321-5614. Don't forget to include your name and the hashtag the 208. Oh, and a word of warning, we may share your message on air at the end of the show, so keep them classy. All right, we now know we can save Earth from an asteroid. On September 26th, NASA and the rocket scientists from Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab successfully crashed a satellite into an asteroid. We were told it was like running a vending machine into a football stadium at 14,000 miles an hour. Not just for fun. No. They wanted to know if it was possible to knock an asteroid off its path toward Earth, should that need ever come up. They called it DART. They still call it DART, the Double Asteroid Redirection Test. And, well, they passed that test. Finding out today, that crash into that asteroid had a bigger impact than expected. The head-on crash slowed down its orbit by 32 minutes. And with such a successful test, they knew the outcome weeks before they expected to. So we thought we'd check back in with Dr. Harrison Agrusa, the Eagle High grad, who now has to figure out what happens next. For fans of astronomy and pretty much all things celestial, the crash that happened 2 weeks ago had a much bigger impact on science.
Yeah, so this is the first time humanity has measurably altered the orbit of a celestial body, which is super exciting.
That's a pretty cool thing to put on your resume.
Yeah.
Eagle High grad, degree in physics and astrophysics from Berkeley, doctorate from Maryland. Harrison Agrusa already had quite the resume. And now you can add interplanetary defender. Were there a lot of party hats and confetti, high fives? What was the reaction?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is once we detected the new orbit period, that also meant that we detected that Dimorphos was still there, right? So that was where we clapped and cheered, like, oh, thank God we didn't destroy the thing, which, it would be cool, I guess, if it was destroyed, right? It'd make headlines and stuff like that, but it would be bad for a planetary defense test, right? Because if we can't measure the result of the test, then it's useless, right? And if we're going to deflect an asteroid in real life, we don't want to blow the thing to bits because now we just turned one projectile into a shotgun, basically, right?
True. Yeah, it's good you didn't destroy it, but that would have made a pretty cool movie.
Yeah, would have been a cool movie, but yeah, NASA would have been upset with us because it would have been an untestable thing.
The test was to see how much they could change the trajectory of an asteroid. The basic goal was to slow its orbit by about a minute.
But we expected a little bit more than that. So between 10 minutes and maybe 50 minutes. Most people probably thought it'd be more like 10 to 20 minutes.
Okay.
So, right, the 30-minute change wasn't outside of the realm of possibilities, but, a lot of us were, I guess, pleasantly surprised is how I would put it.
Now is when Harrison's work takes off to figure out the new orbital dynamics of Dimorphos.
So now, the pre-impact orbit was this sort of circular thing, and now it's shrunk by 32 minutes. So the orbit's gotten a little smaller. So now Dimorphos is orbiting slightly closer to Didymos than it was before. So the gravity it's feeling from Didymos is a little bit stronger. That orbit is slightly eccentric. So it's no longer this nice circle. It's maybe more of an ellipse. And so what we think might happen, and this is part of my job, is Dimorphos will start wobbling in its orbit as it's orbiting around.
Will that wobble affect future missions to that area of space? Well, that's where Harrison's PhD comes in, sort of. What kind of math have you been doing to figure this all out?
Actually, a lot of it is high school physics, to be honest. I use a lot of basic physics and college physics still, simple conservation of momentum and energy, right? If anyone's listening, if you're in high school, I use that stuff every day. And the funny thing is, I still have to Google it every day. I forget all the time. All those equations that your teachers say, you need to have this memorized. I don't memorize any of it. I'm Googling that stuff every other day. But the concepts I remember, right? It's just the exact formula I forget.
Still know the Pythagorean theorem, by the way. He calls himself a PhD. Harrison says his job will be to figure out why that asteroid slowed down. The orbit did more than expected. Maybe it was heavier than they thought. He also has to figure out the new orbit and its wobble that he talked about, since in 4 years there will be a mission to that space of space, which will help get a clearer picture of what that crash did to that asteroid. So his work will help them not be another unintended crash.
more brilliant. Looks a little more like fall today because of the breeze that's kicked up by this dry cold front passed through the region late last night, and it is turning on the wind machine for the day today. Gusts have been close to 40 miles per hour for the Magic Valley, closer to 25 miles per hour for the Treasure Valley, and that breeze continues for the rest of this evening, but it'll be gone by tomorrow, and it's back to our copy-paste continuing forecast with persistence, and that means warmer than average temperatures and dry conditions as this high pressure ridge builds in across the region. So beautiful weather still expected for our mountain locations as the leaves really start to turn as we're getting those longer nighttime hours and shorter days, though there will still be some smoke and haze hanging around. Temperatures in our mountain valleys up through the west central mountains specifically will be in the low to mid 70s throughout the week ahead, and will be about 10 to even close to 15 degrees above seasonal averages for here in the Treasure Valley as we carry on with temperatures in the afternoons in the 70s throughout the week ahead, and perhaps even into the following week as well.
All right, final minute for your comments. Let's get right to them. Rob and Nampa seem to think there are a lot of churches out there with some land available. Hopefully, some of them will hear the call that Collister Church and the church in Nampa has heard and will donate some of this land to affordable housing. So the party who most likely believes in election fraud are encouraging voters to request absentee ballots by including the application in their mailers. How ironic, says Vic in Meridian. Yeah, you caught the point there, which is happening a lot. You may have gotten those mailers and you see that request in there. A good point to pass on. The absentee ballot allows me and my wife to go online, review the candidates on different subjects. When complete, we take it to the Canyon County Clerk's office and drop our vote in the absentee voter's ballot box. No waiting in line, says Rick and Kathy, so it's ease and it's convenient and it gives them time to vote. Why would people give money to Democratic candidates? Idaho people would vote for a dead Republican over anyone with a D by their name, says Joe from Boise. I don't know if that's true, but yes, it is a majority party for a reason in Idaho. Are absentee ballots counted on election night or only when the race is within 1%? I'm not sure where that theory came from, but no. Every vote counts, and they count every single one. We'll see you back here tomorrow.